Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. This episode is proudly sponsored by Integrity Life. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that life is unpredictable, which is why you need to work with a partner that's flexible and loves to collaborate. One that will personalize the claims experience for your clients, one with a balanced approach to underwriting, and one with a competitive and sustainable pricing. Integrity, your partner for life. If you want to learn more about how Integrity is your partner for life, head to integritylife.com.au/XY. G'day, how's it going? What do you know? Struck Like Clayton here with Santi from, well, multiple things, but right now, Lumiant, mate, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, and Clayton, thank you for having me on this auspicious date.
Yes. Funnily enough, I thought my last podcast was last week. I think before we started emailing, and I'm like, I've got literally one day. If we want to squeeze it in, we will make it happen. So it's pretty cool actually, because you've been, a big part of the financial services industry through your work with implemented portfolios for a long time, and to get a chance to sort of, wrap up my podcasting career with you, mate, is an honor. So again, thanks for coming up.
Congratulations to you, mate, and well done for the positive change you've made to many of your members in the industry. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's hilarious. We started out not even knowing what a podcast was, and just repurposing sort of webinars and things like that until we focused on the podcast, and here we are.
Well done, mate.
Thank you. And on to, it's almost the same thing that drives us though, because I'm really dedicated, as a lot of people are, to improving financial services. And the reason, or at least here's my reason, and I'd love to know yours. Financial planning is too important not to be done exceptionally well. That's my kind of like if my brain ever goes into sleep mode, remember like back in XP days, Microsoft XP, and you used to have that scroll, you could get a scrolling sentence along, as your screensaver. That's kind of the screensaver to my mind, which is financial planning is too important not to be done exceptionally well. So it sort of drives everything, and it's why XY is what it is. And because we just went through, Lumiant, but also in you implemented portfolio work as well. You come at things from a particular angle, and I have to know where that comes from. Why? What's this desire to help improve financial planning?
Well, I would say that financial planning should be the most noble profession in the world, and it's not. And I think it's more important than a doctor. I think a great financial planner potentially keeps their clients away from doctors. And, when you do the research, the numbers don't stack up that way. So, financial planning is probably 15th to 20th most respected profession in the world, and it should be number one. So that's what drives me, is to get it to number one. And, when you sit back and you look at this industry, it's actually not that hard to get there. There is a phenomenal opportunity to deliver on the promise of advice. And the promise of advice is helping people lead better lives, not selling them better anything. It was probably what drives me, which is, underpins a lot of my purpose, is that I was trained by the salesman of the industry, so late 90s, early 2000s. And your role was ultimately to sell a product. And quite frankly, I knew what I was selling a client when they walked in the door. That's embarrassing to say it. Doesn't make me feel really good about myself. But we knew what we were selling clients when they walked in the door. They met someone who did care about them, who did spend time getting to know them, probably wrote a nice file note, and then delivered the most meaningless document known to mankind called a statement of advice. And then the next time I had an experience with the clients when they logged on to the product platform to see how they were going to that experience. So it's broken. It's been broken from day one. Now, I experienced the GFC and the outcomes of that, and that wasn't nice to be on the other end of that, being the person who gave that advice. And so ever since then, I've really been on a mission to solve it.
I know exactly what you mean. It's kind of interesting. I came to advice, and advice is always super interesting to find out how people got into advice in the first place, because it's such a peculiar industry. But I got to advice via accounting. So I had already become tax accounting for 3 years. So hilariously, I was still at university, and I got a job as a tax accountant. And my first day on the job, my boss goes, "Here's your office." You know, I'm a kid. And they're like, "Here's an office. You've got 8 appointments this afternoon." And I go, "Whoo." So learning on the job, and thankfully it was relatively simple work. It was, ask a question, get an answer, pop it in the software, right? Over the course of those 3 years, though, obviously, you learn and things become a lot more complicated, and you would start getting return clients and you would become familiar with them. But the limit to the advice was always the prior 12 months, right? Obviously. But I became really accustomed to the concept of delivering a limited, but delivering a service. And then I remember getting a job in sort of really in-depth SMSF work. And then at the end of this experience, I guess at this stage, we're about 4 or 5 years, I then had to learn how to sell. And I then had to learn about product. And then it was kind of interesting because I went through 4 or 5 years of this service-based environment, and then being told that financial planning was, oh, you get paid by the company that the product is from. And I'm like, no, you don't. What are you talking about? But I went off to AMP Horizons for 12 months and had to, I guess, re-educate myself, if that's the polite way of putting it, to begin accepting that this is how the industry worked. And it was so foreign to me because I just come from this professional environment, and then I had to figure out, oh, that this is how the industry works. That's strange. That's not what I thought it was. And then starting the company, and then over the course of, I guess, the next 3 or 4 years, I then re-educated myself back to where I'd come from. But it was a huge journey. And then at so many points along that journey, you're told a specific story. You're told a story that, oh, actually, this is over here. This is financial advice. And it was so confusing. And for my early clients that I took on when I had opened my company, it was, oh yeah, I know how to solve this problem. And I would say I was such a bad advisor when I first launched my company that I've got this ridiculous story of, I figured out the most efficient way to get through the fact-finding process, because at that stage, that's what I had sort of learned to do, is how to get through the fact-find process as quick as possible to get to the statement of advice to get paid. And so I figured out that all I needed was someone to come in and to have their tax file number, and we'll just call the ATO, we'll get all of their super funds, and then we'll just call the super funds. And I was like, we can get this done in 45 minutes. And it was such an inhumane process that someone turned up to my meeting and sat across the desk from me, and we had the meeting, and he said, no, the only reason I turned up is I wanted to see if this was genuinely a scam or not. Because I told the guy to come in and all he needs to bring was his tax file number. And in hindsight, I not only shudder, but that doesn't even get close to how bad that makes me feel and how far away I was from doing the job. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it hurts.
Really does.
Yeah, and we probably could unpack that for hours, how we got to a point where it was that we forgot that the great value of advice is helping people lead better lives and not helping them die rich, but live rich.
Yeah.
And that it all became anchored in my next best product. And And how do I get to that point? I've got to find out what you got. Well, a fact find is not what you got. A fact find is how you feel. How are you feeling about your lives? And not you, but your partner. How are you both feeling about your lives? Where do you feel right now? How confident are you of your financial affairs? It's got nothing to do with what you got. And to be frank, nor should charging for advice have anything to do with what you got. I will accept there's more complexity with more money, but it's not a multiplier of percent. It's maybe a multiplier of dollars. It is helping people lead that better life. Let's undefine what that means to them, and let's deliver that. Because here's the thing: professions don't sell.
Yeah, agreed.
Professions serve.
Yes, professional service.
And serving is understanding and delivering on that understanding.
Yeah,
it's not I'm a great guy and you'll get to know me, and then it's ready for you when you're ready.
Yes.
It's not. It's serving. So how do we serve? And that's kind of what's driven the last 13 years of my life. Plenty of, like any financial plan or any business that has your ups and downs, your mistakes, your wrong turns, you try things that didn't work. But I think we're getting closer.
Mate, we're definitely getting closer. I think sales is done better when you're not selling as well. And that's an interesting concept. Like if you lead someone through a consulting environment where you're examining them, and I think there was this really good data point that came out of, God, I can't remember what it was, but it was like 98% of people want customization in their offer or in their what it is that they're accepting.
Didn't know that.
Yeah,
awesome.
It was an insanely high, or you could call it a selling point. So the selling point was actually that each client wanted to be treated differently, right? And so even like sales is something that it's sort of preset, but selling in a consulting fashion is asking questions. Finding out what's appropriate for them, and then doing the hard work to be able to solve that problem. I think that that's a key part of it as well, because proper sales, or at least selling effectively, means that when you've asked the questions and you've uncovered the need, and this complicated thing that's required in the background is what is required to solve the problem, that you've actually done the hard work to get there. Like going back to the medical profession analogy before, it's one thing to diagnose a pancreas problem, but you also have to have done all the hard work to be able to solve the pancreas problem. It's so asking the questions is absolutely difficult but needs to be done. But then also do all the work that allows you to be able to solve the problems that you uncover as well. And I think both of those lifts the bar of what financial planning is so unbelievably high to compare it to where it was previously, that occasionally that's daunting for some people, but it's also for others really inspiring. And that's kind of been the dual, I guess, nature or the dual response from advisors that I've seen over the course of the last since I've been in personal finance, the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's the way we look at it is we want the client to sell us. How could we create a process where at the end of it, the client said, "How do I work with you?" I actually don't think it's that hard.
Yeah.
Now that I've been through this process of building Lumiant, it's the complete opposite. But it's where 9 out of the 10 of the clients that you want to work with, not 9 out of 10 of clients, we can all win every client that walks in the door. We can do the transaction, that's easy. That's not a business model, quite frankly, though. 9 out of 10 of the clients you want to work with ask to work with you. That their partners go away and go and tell their friends that was the most extraordinary professional services experience I have had in my life. Better than any professional service I've ever met in my life. That's what we're setting out to achieve, right? That's the nobility of advice. And, I'm so passionate. We're so close to it.
So you used to work as a financial planner?
Yeah.
How did you get into advice?
begging. So I was one of those students at uni, and I'd tell my children to do this unless they're going to be doctors, is go and have the best time possible. And I had a 3 years of uni that was just epically good, occasionally turned up, had the time of my life, and managed to pass, right? But, coming out of 98 out of uni, it was tough at times. It was, I think, the Asian crisis. There weren't a heap of jobs around. There's 100 applications for every job, and I had a pass mark through uni. So I begged a mate who was working for a financial planning firm in Brisbane to give me he basically got me work experience, and that was the start back in 98 in Australian financial services. For those who have been around long enough will know them.
So you went straight from uni into financial planning?
Oh, mate, I was, I was press hard 3 copies by 1st of January 1999. It was away. It wasn't quite that bad back then, but it was, wasn't far off it. And then away we went. So I came to Sydney in 2003. 2000, my mistake. 2000 and 2003, I bought into a financial planning firm, which I still own.
Really?
And still very passionate about.
Huh.
And it was 2014 where I stopped being an FP once I sort of started focus running implementer portfolios full time. And now, I've had this scratched itch since actually 2013 was when I fell in love with a man, and I'm happy to admit this particular man knows I fell in love with him, called Joe Duran from United Capital.
Right. Yes.
And I, that sort of changed the way I thought about everything. And I realized that I hadn't solved the problem yet, that there was a problem to solve that was much bigger than I thought. And what they built in that business was something utterly extraordinary, to be quite frank. And if anyone wants to challenge me on why I loved him so much, well, they built a business that sold for $1 billion Aussie in financial planning. So, wow.
Absolutely.
They were onto something.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually haven't followed that story. I've heard a lot from Ray. Ray obviously used to work at Traysto. So that's where you guys know each other. And he walked me through the story of United Capital. But what's that story that, ultimately, and we were discussing this before the podcast started, but money represents how closely you solve the problem that you went out to solve, or at least that's a really nice way that I like to think about it. And so if you're solving financial planning to the tune of $1 billion, I think it's fair to say that you're pretty accurate on solving the problem of financial planning. What was the United Capital financial planning like? What was it about it that changed the way that you thought of financial planning?
Well, look, implemented portfolios, that was a really hard business to build. Imagine building an investment management business as a startup with, in this, and now, it's doing really well. It was about how we could mass customize an investment experience. So this idea was, it's not right that we knew what we were selling people. That's not okay. Let's start with them and finish with them. Let's design their journey around their money. And that's still right today, that business. That's, as far as I'm concerned, my DNA hasn't shifted one bit. But what I realized was the investment management outcome is such a small part of the actual outcome of great advice. And so though we fixed a problem, potentially we fixed the wrong problem. And that's when I heard about United. There's a wonderful story that I think I can throw Alex Vikovich into. So sorry, Alex, but we were on a New York bar rooftop, and I got this opportunity to meet this guy in United, and I was on the next plane basically in an awful state. And I got to. He said to me later, I said, and he's now a friend of mine. I'm in fact catching up with him tomorrow in the US. He said, I was going to give you 10 minutes, and we ended up talking for an hour and a half. And what smashed me about it was that they'd come at it completely the different angle. They said, screw what you invest in, not important, really. Really kind of, we'll choose that journey that you take back there, that we'll get to that. But in order for us to do what we do, we need to understand what's important to you and your partner. But firstly, we will not meet with you without your partner in the room. And then we're going to deeply take you through a process. Trust us. We know what we're doing. We're the professionals. We're going to uncover what's important to you in your life. You might feel a bit uncomfortable going through the process. By the end of it, every client was saying, how do we work with you? Because no financial services company in that landscape had actually sat down and started with them and unpacked what was important to them, unpacked what drove them in life, unpacked how they felt about their life, and maybe started a conversation between a couple they'd never had before or hadn't had for some time. And what became clear to me, and I guess United weren't thinking this way at the time, but when I sat back and looked about it, you hear about this whole goals, values-based conversation, right? Yeah, I like the conversation, but to be honest, it's annoying because the answer's so straightforward. Values don't change, goals do. What's more important than anything in any financial services relationship you have is that you align your values, because that's the stuff that matters in your life. In fact, I could argue that we should take values conversations to kids at school. And for God's sake, before you do anything about your career, understand what makes you happy. Not the goal, not the outcome. What makes you happy today? What's the thing that gets you out of bed? What makes you feel happy about yourself? And align your career to that. And the same when it comes to financial planning. We've got to help people understand what's important to them, because we don't have a better product, but we can help people understand what those things mean. Then we find our goals, right? Off the back of understanding what's important to people in their life, heaps of goals. We're already uncovering, we did a process last week. We uncovered 16 goals in a couple, 16 things that they want to work out on in their life. Now, as an advisor, again, sale, not serve, as an advisor, the clients just told me 16 things I want to work on. Now, some of them are spend more time together and, have a date night once a week. Cool. Well, we'll make you accountable to that. And then some of them are real financial. Some of them are helping children. Some of them are helping grandchildren. Some is helping the niece's daughter. Some is about spending more time, enjoying the journey today. And some are retiring at 60. And it doesn't kind of stop. But when you can understand what drives people in life, like, it becomes such an easy business. Right now, I'm just going to help you do that.
Yes.
It doesn't, product actually irrelevant. Like, it doesn't matter one bit. And then the goals come out, fantastic. Now, here we know what we know, and this is a critical bit. Values don't change. Who you are is who you are. I have been someone who's wanted to challenge the status quo my entire life. From school, the headmasters hated me. That has never changed who I am, right? It's in my DNA. I can't change that.
Yes.
And having purpose around that is so critical to who I am as a person. But goals do. Goals change all the time. Shit, you have a medical event. Oh, I'm going to change my goals. I've had children. I'm going to change my goals. I've had deaths in family. I'm going to change my goal. It doesn't stop. So that's cool. So the value of great advice, and here's it. This is it. And this is what United made me realize. It's as simple as this, that financial planning is a series of turning points at trade-offs. It's just as complicated as it gets. That the value of a great advice is helping people make great decisions at those turning points. That is it. That's just, we've heard about this advisor alpha stuff. That is it. Helping you make great decisions at turning points. My job as an advisor is to set up the guardrails for you to live the life that you've dreamt of. I know you're going to bounce off them. In fact, I'm certain you're going to bounce off them, because you know what? I bounce off my own guardrails. We're always going to bounce off the guardrails. And when we hit the guardrails, we've got to have a chat, and it's going to be a turning point, and we're going to have a trade-off conversation. And it may be that, Santi, you got to work less. You know what? Because you'll bloody bust a gasket if you don't. It might be that you need to spend more time, family, because your relationship's going to blow up. These are the conversations that we're going to have. You might have had a child and you go, what? It's just not worth the effort I'm putting in anymore. I want to have more time with my family. Okay, well, let's understand the consequences of that decision. That's the value of extraordinary advice, and helping people live in those guardrails and set them up for them. That's amazing. What we put them into, look, unless you're really going out of your way to blow it up, buying some really crazy stuff, It's going to be hard to blow it up, right? We're in a pretty safe world these days, It's hard to blow it up, right?
Yes.
And quite frankly, if we get 8% or 9%, it's not going to change the game. If we can help people live the life that they dreamt of, woohoo, that's incredible, right? Now we've done something great.
Right, that is awesome. And I resonate with so much of that. So one of the things that you said before I thought was super interesting was that we solved a problem, but maybe we solved the wrong problem. And I know what you mean by that. So you were looking at advice and thinking, how can we improve it? And then the conclusion that you came to so the premise was advice can be done better. The conclusion that you came to was we'll give each client a unique investment journey.
Yeah, that's experience. Got that one. Yep.
And I totally get that. And That makes a lot of sense. And then over the course of and obviously well done on the growth of that company in itself, but then over the course of that, due to United Capital, but obviously, a bunch of other things I'm sure that you sort of looked at in your own time, you thought, how can I solve this beyond the investments? Or what David Haynes, and I always shout out to David on this, I just think it's such a great way of articulating it. Above the line, below the line. Below the line is the investment piece. It is it's traditional financial planning. It's dollar signs. It's numerics. It is everything that you would think of as traditional financial planning. And then above the line is everything that doesn't have a dollar sign attached to it directly. What you want out of life, where you want to spend your time. There's a lot of qualitative information in there. It's very emotional. And to my mind, it opens up financial planning beyond the scope of the rational. So if anything, below the line stuff is never to be replaced in my mind. It is a ticket to the game. And just because the conversation is going further than what's below the line, it doesn't mean below the line is not important. I always give that caveat. It is ticket to the game. You have to know what you're doing there. You have to have your degree. You have to understand money, because you can't make a poor decision there. But beyond that, what are the emotional things in advice? And because most decisions in life are emotional, it's almost ludicrous that financial planning hasn't spent more time in that area. And I was speaking to, I'm not sure if you've come across this on Reddit, which I don't even know if you know what Reddit is, but
I heard about it for the first time last week.
Okay, so there's a bit of a movement going on where the people, if you want to think about it in that way, are taking on the hedge funds, and they're currently winning. We'll see how it goes, but there's a bunch of kids, and they are kids that are making a bunch of cash at the moment. And now one of my friends, his eldest son is about 20 years old, has made a couple $100,000, right? Like just a couple of $100,000 in the course of a couple of months, all because he's jumped onto this investment thing, right? And so he wanted me to tell his son to pull the money out. First and foremost, the thing that my buddy doesn't understand, that I understand, that money is highly emotional. It is the most emotional thing in our life. And so if I'm going to walk up to this 20-year-old, fully grown gent and tell him what to do with his money just because his dad wants it to happen, it's just never, ever going to happen. And so I walked this kid through what he was experiencing. I said, what you've done is you've come into more money than you've ever had or ever thought, and it's worked out far better than you could have. And I guarantee you right now, you can't think about much else than this investment. Is that right? And he was like, yeah, like I'm waking up in the middle of the night checking it. I'm like, that doesn't surprise me, because money is highly emotional. It is again, the most emotional thing in our life. And I walked him through, and I was like, this is the experience that I've got in personal finance when people have these events, blah, 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 blah. And I said, this is not financial advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're your own man. You do what you want. But here's a couple of things that I think gives you a fuller picture of what you're experiencing right now on an emotional level, and how you'll feel in a month or a year or whenever it is that it's over, what you wish you would have thought about during this time. That is a piece of psychology that I've only learnt by speaking with hundreds of people about money. And it is the part of financial planning that we have traditionally not put as much focus on. And yet I think what will probably end up happening is this kid's going to end up making smarter decisions with that money because of the conversation that I had with him about emotion, rather than his old man who was just get that money out of this, And in a microcosm is the value of financial advice. It is those guardrails, is those pivotal, is making smarter decisions at pivotal moments, but also knowing how to handle those conversations. And financial planning I think the way that you articulate it was fantastic. You know, it should be the most noble profession. And I don't think it's beyond the scope of the whole trend of financial planning. So Lumiant, for example, and we went through it prior to the podcast. I've had some great conversations with people around financial coaching and teaching people how to be a financial coach and learning if for whatever reason they haven't learned on the job, or just to get better at having those conversations, asking those questions and getting a fuller impact from the advice. But I haven't seen it done in tech before. And yeah, that was my comment at the end of it, which was this is a platform. It's the first thing that I've seen that is a platform of the above the line type of advice.
Oh, well said.
Yeah, and I just think it's a very unique thing to have, and so well done.
Well, thank you, mate. What you said there. So, time to shout out to the advisors around the country, right? So they're actually all brilliant, right? They all love what they do, right? Agreed. They are genuinely passionate about the client. They genuinely care about the client. They want to understand the client. They do incredible file notes showing that they understand the client. Yes. And it goes into this magical place called a filing cabinet. It is just friggin' wrong. And the next time the client logs on, they go to the Morningstar benchmark. Like, you can see where it breaks down. Like, it's, if you just sit and look at it, it just breaks down. And so how do you fix it? You bring that file note to life. You bring that conversation to life. You make that the thing that anchors the advice. That moment in your life where we changed something, that you achieved something, that your confidence got better, that you had a wonderful year, that your career's improved, that your family time's improved. That's brilliant. And you're on track to live the life that you want. There's nothing more important than that for well-being. So I guess if I dumb this down, the way we've looked at it as I guess we've just had this conversation is, let's bring it to life. And just remove the other stuff.
Bring to life what the advisor's already doing.
They love it.
Forced to stick it, instead of just sticking it in a file note. Let's talk about it with the client. And one of the advisors I was mentioning to you before the podcast started, Tuborjan, who's turned so if you imagine that at one stage in my career, I was the worst at fact finding. Telling the person to bring in a tax file number and nothing else, and we'll get it done. So if that's the worst, he's got the best, and he's sort of fleshed it out to be a 12-month process of asking questions, and he charges for it, right? There's no advice at the end of this process. It's 12 months or 6 to 12 months, depending on the complexity of the individual. But again, the customization is there, right? So he goes through and simply the journey of asking the questions is so powerful that in itself is a service. And to me, that I don't think anything dawned on me in terms of we've missed the value of advice more than the fact that he was able to turn what I considered a hindrance at that stage in my career to getting the work done. He turned a hindrance into a value proposition, and just has that complete understanding of the value. When you say the value of advice, that's what it is. And so,
but what he's done there is quite extraordinary, right? He's taken two words, fact find, where we were trained. Fact find is what do they got?
Yes.
How wrong were we, right? How wrong were we to be trained that way? It's nothing to do with what we got. He's taken those two words and sounds like turned it into an extraordinary experience about what they want. That's a fact find, right?
Absolutely. And so I'm really excited about all this sort of stuff that is become, getting to the fore. We XY, we recently did a crowdfund, and we went to the advisors and we said, hey, do you back us enough to continue doing this? And thankfully, I can say that's what's occurred. I know Lumiant did a very similar strategy, and congrats on that. There's nothing that says keep going than your community funding the continuation of the company. And so I know we can both thank advisors for that crowdfund. Mate, I just wanted to say, yeah, look, in my podcasting career aside, it's conversations like these that makes me super pumped for financial planning, and it's to have enough of these, because if you want to call it the conditioning of financial planning is one thing, and then what's available for financial planners to provide is a completely other thing. And the longer or the more conversations I have like this, the more I think, wow, I've still got so much more to learn and so much more to think about. And so even just this conversation is making me think there's so much more to advice than even before we had this conversation. So, mate, it's a very classy way to hang up the microphone on my end, so to speak.
Well, and I'll leave it with one thought too, because I was on the periphery when you guys founded XY, as you know.
That's right.
On a very close periphery, and not that I gave it a lot of thought, but geez, you've done an incredible job. How much does this industry need it? Incredibly. Like the positive impact that you've played is, well, probably potentially second to none. So well done on that too. And I know it's just the start of another journey.
Yeah. Awesome, mate. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad we got to squeeze it in. And yeah, mate, all the best with everything you're doing. But yeah, especially Lumiant, mate. Well done.
You too. Thanks, mate.